West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
Our readings today. First reading is of a graduate of Eastern University with a degree in creative writing and a minor in French from the Sorbonne. Imani Barbarin writes from a perspective of a Black woman with cerebral palsy. She specializes in blogging, science fiction, and memoir. She's an activist and an online rabble-rouser. When I call myself disabled, your opinions don't matter, by Imani Barbarin. Because I am disabled, I've become accustomed to the way in which people talk about disabled people and disabilities. It's like they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. It can be freeing to claim a word people don't understand, even hate to describe yourself. It feels like a rebellion within a word, disabled. I've spent so much time in my childhood mourning something I never was, abled. So many people compared me to a version of myself that I never existed, that it felt like I had lost her, or that I was letting everyone down for not being her. I was born with my disability. Cerebral palsy has been in my medical chart since I was 2 years old. The dream that I will never walk perfectly never started with me. It was a combination of well-meaning family members and complete strangers telling me that their own abled bodies were the standard of ability, and that if I didn't want that for myself, I was giving up. When I found the word disabled, everything made sense to me for the first time. I was grounded in place on feet that I had never before felt steady. I was so used to apologizing for my existence, making myself small so that the appearance of my crutches were never too abrasive or distracting. Everything good in my life, everything I've worked for, came through not denying the word disabled, but embracing it. It doesn't make any of it easier, but it has set me free. I'm free. My greatest burden associated with my disability wasn't the diagnosis, but the shame others imposed on me because of it. That shame wasn't mine to hold. Offered as wisdom for the journey. May we walk in its light.
Walk in its light.
Eli Clare is a poet, writer, thinker, and teacher. He weaves hope, critical analysis, and compassionate storytelling together in his work on disability and queerness, insisting on the twine of race, class, gender, sexuality, and disability. In the introduction to his latest book, Brilliant Imperfection, Grappling with the Cure, he uses the metaphor of a mosaic when grappling with his thesis. The mosaic is layered and multicolored in rainbows of hues. It's different from different angles and at different times of day. None of the pieces are the same shape or size. The image of the mosaic applies to this morning's examination of disability rights in changing societal views and practices around medical assistance in dying. It's a complicated and jagged issue with many viewpoints and angles to consider, much like a mosaic. From Brilliant Imperfection, Grappling with Cure by Eli Clare. Meandering through a working-class neighborhood in Chicago, I happened upon a mosaic spread across the front of a community center. The colors catched me. Purple, lavender, yellow, orange danced together. Up close, the tiles are smooth, jagged, rounded, reflective, translucent, sparkling in the morning sun. No two pieces the same size or shape. I trail my fingers along the mosaic, feeling bumps and ridges, the tile's rough edges, almost sharp, And then I step back to the curb. The individual shapes become less distinct, and a woman's face, a boy in a handstand, feet akimbo, a hand holding a paintbrush emerge. They are vibrant, fractured, whole. I'm drawn back to the mosaic later in the day, the bright yellows, now light browns in the afternoon shade. I stand again at the curb, admiring. At this angle, I see spirals and stars, concentric circles of blue, and a river of deep red. I could swear they weren't there this morning. Standing at the curb, I know that the spirals and stars, concentric circles of blue, were here all along. They simply appeared because my angle changed. Come, sit with me. Let this mosaic that began a conversation spark 100 new conversations. Offered as wisdom for the journey. May we walk in its light.
We walk in its light.
My very first pastoral care visit as an ordained minister when I was settled in Stratford was for a 90-something-year-old man. I can't remember his name, and I never met him again, but he was on my visitation list. And it was a pretty good visit, although it really consisted of him spending 20 minutes telling me why no one should ever live hooked up to a machine. After he got that point across to me, he said, "You must be awfully busy." So I took the hint and I left. But he did get something off his chest that he wanted to. And he definitely wanted to tell me that being hooked up to a machine is not how he wants to end his life. And I respect that. I honor his point of view. I understand why people choose medical assistance in dying. And in a vacuum, medical assistance in dying is grounded in life. And I have a very personal reason for believing this. My father had early onset Alzheimer's starting when he was around 53. And by the time he was 60, he was in a long-term care facility. He lived there several years, strapped to a chair, unable to feed himself. He could shuffle around a bit, but he never spoke a word. And I found it traumatic to visit him. And the thing is, I know he wouldn't have wanted to live this way. I was quite young when he started exhibiting dementia, and I never really knew him as an adult. But I know he never wanted to live that way. But there was no medical assistance in dying back then. But I do have a memory of my brother who was living out of town telling me that he had thoughts of flying into Winnipeg and smothering him and then flying out. And I understood my brother's feelings. So in a vacuum, I'm definitely in favor of medical assistance in dying. Now, medical assistance in dying is a fairly recent phenomenon. I remember in the 1990s, Dr. Jack Kevorkian publicly advocated for medical assistance in dying and indeed helped over 130 people die. He was eventually convicted of second-degree murder and served 8 years in prison. And in the Netherlands, they legalized medical assistance in dying around 20 years ago. But in Canada, it's only been legal for less than a year, or just over a year. And there are 11 states in the US where medical assistance in dying has been legalized. Now, the historic argument against medical assistance in dying is that life is sacred, and that we have no right to end it under any circumstance. Life is a gift from God, and ending a life or not even doing everything you possibly can to keep someone alive is a crime against God. Now, without going too deeply into this discussion, I would like to assert that Christian argument against medical assistance in dying is a toxic representation of Christianity. I'm saying this not as an apologist for Christianity, but I want to marginalize the dogma about the meaning and sacredness of life should supersede anyone's suffering. Forcing people to stay alive while they must live in pain to satisfy an intellectual belief or dogma cannot be grounded in life. Instead, it's about controlling people's bodies. And I think in many ways it starts with women's bodies. We are born to die, and no one gets out of here alive. And in some ways, I do believe that life is sacred, but we must not force people to suffer because of an intellectual exercise. Suffering is real, and I've heard several elderly people in my time as a minister who were suffering, and they were begging for death. And like the guy in my first pastoral visit said, nobody should be forced to live hooked up to a machine. We are here to reduce suffering, not prolong it. So in a vacuum, I'm unequivocally in favor of medical assistance in dying. But the problem is, we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a web of life, and we must be careful when we institutionalize any measures with such finality. Because we live in a web of life, we must consider how our laws and rules and mores affect one another, especially those who are different. And in this case, there's a possibility that medical assistance in dying can be harmful to disabled people. And this is personal for me as well, because I have a sister who committed suicide when she was 42, and her kids were just 14 and 16. Her suicide caused a lot of suffering for her family, and especially her children. Now, I know she'd been depressed her whole adult life, and honestly, I wasn't surprised at all when I heard she had killed herself. And I know that she suffered, and in some way death was a release for her. But I don't think what she needed was medical assistance in dying. Instead, what she needed was support for her depression. She needed suicide prevention. She needed accommodations. Now, I get that there's a big difference between someone choosing to commit suicide and choosing medical assistance in dying. Those are not the same things. And I get why someone with a painful, debilitating, fatal disease would want to choose their own time and method of death. And I think it's a reasonable choice, and I support someone in that situation where they're suffering and they're terminally ill, choosing how to end their own life. But in Canada last fall, Bill C-7, the bill that approved medical assistance in dying, they approved it outside of end-of-life situations. Canada is the first country to allow for medical assistance in dying for those who are not in an end-of-life situation. And this is something that really concerns disability activists, such as the Council of Canadians with Disabilities. And that's an organization which works for the human rights of disabled people. They pointed out that the Canadian Psychiatric Association didn't include suicide prevention in their position statement on medical assistance in dying. And not addressing suicidality and suicide prevention in a position statement on medical assistance in dying is a serious and dangerous flaw. And just a few weeks ago, there was an article at ctvnews.ca about a 31-year-old woman living in Toronto who uses a wheelchair and is close to receiving final approval for a medical assistance in dying after a fruitless bid to secure affordable housing that doesn't worsen her chronic illnesses. Denise, which is not her real name, was diagnosed with multiple chemical sensitivities, and that triggers rashes, difficult breathing, and blinding headaches that cause temporary paralysis. She desperately wants to move into an apartment that's wheelchair accessible and has cleaner air. But her only income is from Ontario's Disability Support Program, or ODSP, and she receives a total of $1,169 a month, plus $50 for a special diet. And Denise tells us that I've applied for medical assistance in dying essentially because of abject poverty. And this problem asks a core question. What do we owe our neighbors in the web of life? Obviously, accommodations for disabled people are sorely lacking in our society, as this pandemic has shown. And Imani Barbarin created the hashtag #MyDisabledLifeIsWorthy to lift up the challenges that disabled people face. She was expressing outrage about the comments of the Center for Disease Control in the United States, Rochelle Walensky, who said that it was really encouraging that the Omicron variant is predominantly killing Americans who have other health problems. And the Disability Rights and Education Defense Fund posted an open letter to Walensky calling her remarks abhorrent. And what they said was that your words convey that the deaths of disabled people are acceptable. Not only is this message from the head of the CDC abhorrent, it perpetuates widely and wrongly held perceptions that disabled people have a worse quality of life than non-disabled people, and that our lives are more expendable. Henderson implored Walensky to reflect on her words and potentially fatal consequences and the bias around them, asking the CDC director to change how you speak about the lives and deaths of disabled people. And this is just part of the complexity in our world when life is at stake. In my opinion, someone choosing to end their life when they're faced with an imminent, painful death is grounded in life. It's accepting death as a part of life, which it is. We are born to die. But on the other hand, disabled people are shunted to the margins, and their lives are considered less worthy than mine. Providing accommodations to Denise so that she can continue her life is a commitment to the web of life. It's grounded in life, it's guided by love, and it's growing in wisdom. Our government should provide affordable housing to someone like Denise. And this should be done independent of a pandemic or medical assistance in dying. We must value the life of Denise just as much as we value my life. Our government cannot make it easier for her to die than to access the basic needs that she needs to live. And providing Denise with what she needs to live is guided by love and compassion. Now, I get this is complicated. Not providing accommodation to Denise, that's simple and straightforward. And we as a society owe that to disabled people. No, what is complicated is balancing the needs of disabled people with a person who is suffering and their right to choose to die with dignity. So this is complicated and it shouldn't really surprise us. And this complication is lifted up in Eli Clare's mosaic in that working class neighborhood in Chicago. We need the colors dancing together in the light: purple, lavender, yellow, orange. We must look up close and see the variety of tiles: smooth, jagged, rounded, reflective, translucent, sparkling in the morning sun. No two pieces the same size and shape. And we must step back to the curb for another perspective. The individual shapes become less distinct, and a picture emerges: a woman's face, a boy in a handstand, a hand holding a paintbrush. All these pictures emerge, and they are vibrant, fractured, and whole. We must honor the different viewpoints and the different needs and the nodes of the web of life. We must listen and grow in the wisdom of our disabled neighbors. But we must also listen to the suffering of those who are near the end of life and want to live and die in dignity. I'm not saying I have all the answers. This is a thorny and jagged problem. And I will never question someone who chooses medical assistance in dying. I'm offering no judgment to anyone on this path. I understand it. And I see how this decision can be grounded in life. But the way we are currently organized, our neoliberal society, means that I must question medical assistance in dying as it is encoded in law. It is not inherently unethical or inhumane to the person choosing medical assistance in dying, but it is harmful to the others in the web of life. It's harmful to my disabled neighbors. And we must make it easier and straightforward for our disabled neighbors to choose life if we are to be guided by love and compassion. And as I say these words, I think of my father suffering in a long-term care facility, his brain destroyed by Alzheimer's, but his body still strong because he was young, and the suffering he endured. But if we are to center love and compassion and the interconnectedness of the web of life, then maybe that suffering that my father went through was compassionate. As I said earlier, compassion means to share suffering. It means co-suffering. It means to suffer with, to suffer together. And so maybe in the end, the suffering that my father endured without medical assistance in dying was so that his disabled neighbors might live. And if that suffering is my future, and I must suffer so that disabled people can live, then perhaps that suffering is an act of compassion. Perhaps the suffering of my father and my future suffering is grounded in life, guided by love, and growing in wisdom. Peace.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.